What's going on, growers? It's James Prigioni coming to you live from Jersey. Just because you don't have a lot of space, that doesn't mean you can't grow your own food. So today, me and Tuck want to share with you how to grow beans in containers. Let's go! Green beans are one of my favorite summer veggies to snack on. And the thing that's great about them is they're relatively easy to grow. Before I get into too much of the specifics in regards to growing green beans, I first want to talk about the pot that we're growing in. If you want to use a 5-gallon container like I am, it's very important that you use a food grade container. Super important. I just picked this up from Home Depot or Lowe's, any of your big box stores like that. Another reason I love this 5-gallon container is because it's white. So since this is white, when the sun hits it, it's going to reflect the sun off of it, as opposed to a container that's black that will track the sun, and then that could heat up and cook the roots on the inside. Now that we know what kind of container we're going to use, the next thing we need to do is drill holes at the bottom so that the moisture inside can drain out. This is super important to have good drainage, because one of the biggest problems I see with new gardeners or anyone who's growing in pots is that their soil doesn't drain well enough. As a result of that, the bottom half of the container goes anaerobic. If that happens, that's a really bad thing, because if your soil goes anaerobic at the bottom, which means without oxygen, then the plant that's growing at the top, those roots will have nowhere to go. They're not going to want to grow into that anaerobic soil because it's essentially poison. So that's the opposite of what we want. Having this ability to drain moisture is so huge. If you don't have enough holes at the bottom, then that anaerobic soil, that's going to end up being the root of your problems. After we have our container chosen and prepped, the next thing we need to think about is what kind of soil we're going to be using. So you can do a few different things. You can either buy your own potting mix. If you do, I suggest you use something like the Fox Farms Happy Frog potting mix. That's my favorite one, but it can get a little expensive. Instead, what I like to do is build my own soil, and it's not that hard. What you don't want to do is use native soil. Native soil will be too dense and your plants won't grow well in it. You will think you're saving money, but you're really losing time, so the trade-off isn't worth it. If you want to build your own soil like I do, there's a basic mixture I can give you. So essentially what I use as my framework is 1/3 compost, 1/3 peat moss or cocoa coir, and then 1/3 vermiculite or perlite. After that, what I did for this, for my green beans, was I added a little bit of dolomite lime. The reason I did that was because since I added some peat moss, that lowered the pH of my soil, and beans like to grow in a pretty neutral soil. So by adding that dolomite lime, I brought my acidity back to pretty basic. Now that we have our soil made and mixed, the next thing we want to do is actually moisten this soil down before we put it into the pots. The reason we want to do this is because when we put the soil in the pots, we want to make sure that there's no pockets of dry peat moss or cocoa coir, because we really don't want that. That'd be negative for the plant, and if it tries growing into really dry soil, well, that just won't work. So the next thing we want to take into account is when we're filling up these pots, because they're so tall, we don't need to fill the pot all the way to the top. We can just fill it to about 3/4 and then plant it into there, and then after we water, it'll mat down a little bit. But again, we don't need this whole entire pot full of soil, because for some plants, the roots won't even reach down into there, which means that they won't be able to get all the excess moisture down there. So I would say about 3/4 filled is a perfect amount. You'll kind of notice that we spent all this time and we haven't really even talked that much about green beans yet, but that's okay, because to be a successful gardener, you really need proper preparation. And now that we've prepped everything properly, growing the beans is going to be pretty easy. For today, we're going to be talking about growing green beans or snap beans. We're going to be growing the beans for the pod, not for the actual dried seed. So when it comes to growing green beans, you can grow either bush ones or pole beans. So right here is a bush bean. These ones I like growing. I can compact them pretty close together. They grow really well on their own, and you can see this is just loaded with beans. One of the varieties I like a lot. Delicious bean. And you could also grow pole beans. So let me bring you over to a section where we have some pole beans right over behind me here in the keyhole raised bed garden. And when you're growing pole beans, you really need to have a trellis. That's super important. That's really going to be one of the main differences between the bush beans and the pole beans. You need that trellis, because these things will grow wild, and if you don't have a trellis for them to grow up, then they're just going to strangle themselves out. So basically, most beans, the growing conditions are very similar. Only difference really is the trellis when it comes to some of your pole beans. Beans grow best in a sunny location, but they will tolerate some shade. This is a summer plant, so they grow best in temperatures about 70 degrees to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. When it comes to the soil temperature, it needs to be at least say 60 degrees Fahrenheit for the beans to grow well. One of the biggest issues I see new gardeners make when it comes to beans is the same thing with cucumbers. They plant their beans and their cucumbers out too early, thinking that they're putting themselves ahead by planting out early, when they're just taking themselves a step back, because these kind of plants won't grow well until the weather changes. A simple way that I like to think about it is we plant our peas in the spring and we plant our green beans in the summer. We don't want to be planting green beans in the spring. It's just going to hold us back a little bit. So when we are planting our green beans, we can plant them a few different ways. One way that I like to do it, that I did for these ones, is I planted the beans early into a cell. And in that cell, all I actually used was just cocoa coir, because I knew that I would be transplanting the beans out of the cell really quickly. So I just used cocoa coir as my starting mix. I planted those beans directly into the cocoa coir. And then after they popped up, what I did was I just decided to transplant that right into my soil. When I did, I looked at how many it would fit, and I decided with about 3 bean plants looked like they would fit perfect in the 5-gallon bucket. So that's what I went with. You don't have to do it this way. It actually ends up being a little more work, and green beans typically do not like being transplanted. An easy way to do it is to just put your soil into the pot and then direct seed those beans right into the soil. When your beans start to flower, you want to make sure that you're providing them with a high level of moisture. Now that they're producing fruit, they need some moisture in order to actually produce it. So it's good to have a nice thick mulch down like we've got here. This mulch helps to retain the moisture in the top level of the soil, so the top just doesn't dry out really fast. That's super important. Also, when it comes to growing green beans, you don't have to add any additional fertilizer, especially if you made soil like I did with a good amount of compost. It actually can be negative if you use a fertilizer, because we don't want to use a fertilizer with a high level of nitrogen, because this is a legume. It's a nitrogen fixing plant. So this creates its own nitrogen. If we give too much of a nitrogen fertilizer to this, it'll focus just on the production of leaves as opposed to the production of flowers and fruit. And that's really what we want. Green beans are great to grow in pots too, because they're self-pollinating. So you really would only need 1 plant in order to get the beans, but we've got a few planted into here. When it comes to harvesting your beans, the more you harvest, the more you'll get. So it's good to harvest them when they're small. This is a good size to grab them, in my opinion. And this one over here is just a little big, but that's still okay. We'll still grab that. You'll notice when I harvested that bean, it's important that what we do is we hold the plant when we're pulling the bean. So we want to take the bean, we want to hold onto the plant with one hand and then pull the bean with the other hand, or cut it off. We don't want to be yanking at the plant when we're pulling the beans, or that'll just negatively affect it. And like I mentioned, when it comes to beans, the more we harvest, the more we get. Because what we're essentially doing is tricking this plant. So the whole goal of this plant is to produce offspring seed for next year. So when we take this bean and remove it, then the plant thinks, oh no, I need to produce more flowers so I can produce more fruit, so more beans so that I can produce seed next year. So when we keep picking, we actually get a bigger harvest. These beans look really good. I want to taste one, but it looks like we've got a little guy maybe down here who wants the first taste. What do you think of the dragon tongues, boy? Oh, there you go. He's been waiting for this. He's been patient. Hit that like button if you guys are thankful for Tuck being patient. He threw away that first piece because it was the end. Now he likes eating the centers, just like the carrots. This guy's so good. He's making me even hungry eating these. I'll have to try a piece too. Snap it off. Mmm. You would think it'd be like a little hard or stringy with the size, but these beans, these dragon tongues, they're by far my favorite bean. I think everyone should be planting them. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. I hope that you don't let a lack of space prevent you from being a part of all the blessings that come along with gardening. Just the countless and endless ones, the food, the joy, the connection. It's all so valuable, and I do not want you guys to miss out on that. Before I let you go, I wanted to thank Larissa Aspen, one of the new channel members. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow and for contributing. It means a lot to me and Tuck to know that you guys are really getting value out of the videos and that you're willing to give something back for it. It's just, it feels really good, and we want to thank you for it. Before you guys do any of your shopping on Amazon too, I want to remind you to use our Amazon affiliate link. That helps out a lot. Also check out the merch down low and hit the like and subscribe button, because the likes do really help the channel. Sometimes it may seem monotonous to hit a like on every video, but it really helps like overall, and it lets us know that the videos that we're making, you guys are, you're enjoying them. So Tuck's kind of hanging out in the shade underneath the raspberries right now. He's just trying to soak up some shade now that it's so hot outside. So we're just so grateful to have him be a part of the garden, and we try to incorporate him into the videos because you guys love seeing him, and he's a part of the garden. He can't be separated from it. So if you guys did enjoy the video though, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. James and Tuck will be back at you again real soon. We